think that when you focus on incorporating those alcohol-free alternative into your ritual, into your celebration, at the end of the day, the week, the months, you realize that you're drinking less alcohol.
For me, when I look back at my life, my childhood with outdoor play with my friends, like experiencing all the things that I could do with physical movement, was incredible.
Yeah, it's using up headspace that could be focused elsewhere, like moving your body, like eating generally pretty well.
We can also develop those safer alternatives based on evidence that they don't activate pathways that cause cancer.
I think that what I really try to build with La Maison Wellness and with everything that I create is a positive approach to mindful drinking, to not feel like you're restricting yourself, that you're missing out, because I truly believe that becoming a mindful drinker, you gain so much more than actually you think that you lose. And so focusing on finding alternatives that you truly enjoy. So finding those cocktails that you enjoy making that are maybe low alcohol or non-alcoholic, or finding this amazing alcohol replacement like non-alcoholic wine, or having like some non-alcoholic beer in your fridge. Like for me, my fridge is always stacked with a handful of things that I really enjoy, because I love to have a drink at the end of the day. I think the ritual of, slowing down, sitting down, having something to drink, cooking a nice dinner. Like I have a very busy and often chaotic life. I run my business. I have young children that are, under 3. I've got twins, which also bring a lot of joy, but a lot of chaos. And so for me, like, it's really important to be able to have me time, but I just benefit so much from choosing alcohol-free option, because again, sleep is so important to me, because I want to feel clear-headed the day after, because I want to make sure that I have, my full energy and clarity of mind. And so I think that when you focus on incorporating those alcohol-free alternative into your ritual, into your celebration, at the end of the day, the week, the months, you realize that you're drinking less alcohol. And then you start to really feel the benefits of it. And the more you feel the benefits, the less you want to drink. And that was really my journey. I mean, if you asked me 10 years ago if I will become alcohol-free, I would have laughed. Like, generally, I would have been like, never.
So yes, so we do have this love-hate relationship with exercise. If you're an athlete, it's easy to justify why I need to do so. If you want to get into your, beach body ready, or you're getting married and you want to get into that dress or into your suit, or you want to run for charity, and yes, I've got a mission. Then it's easier to convince yourself.
It's always about the aesthetic in those scenarios, isn't it? It's not really about health, is it?
No, it's. I think we like to say it's about health, but again, it's okay for us to consider our vanity, and to consider that part of the reasons we get into shape. I mean, again, the words that we use, right? I want to get into shape. Yeah. New Year's resolutions. I want to get into shape. I want to get fit. Most of it is not about getting fit. Most of it is about the physical aspect. Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And of course, getting into shape will lead to health benefits for sure. But if we embrace the fact that exercise does feel like a chore, that we often procrastinate around decisions to exercise, that's what led me to deciding to develop the Proper Play method. I asked myself the question, why, as an individual who's improved their health for exercise, who's like evangelical about it, I love exercise, I go to the gym every day, I'm like so passionate about it, why was I deciding, actually, I feel like I'm going to give the gym a miss today? It's Wednesday, but I'll go next Monday. Why was I putting off my gym time week after week after week? Why was I going to the gym and clock watching? Oh, when is this gonna end? So I was like, there's something not right with that experience. And so I asked myself, when was the last time you loved movement? And as an adult, that was, as a student, going out clubbing and dancing all night and not thinking it was exercise, not thinking about burning calories. It was just, I'm loving this moment and I hope it doesn't end.
Yeah.
And the ending would be the DJ saying, night's over, or the songs not being to my taste, And then the second was as a child, where, long, hot summer days, get out and amuse yourselves. Don't come back unless it's time for something to eat or the sun goes down. For me, when I look back at my life, my childhood with outdoor play with my friends, like experiencing all the things that I could do with physical movement, was incredible. And so I wanted to recreate that joy and passion for movement as an adult. And that's what the primal play method is about.
Yeah. So you changed your life. You set up Primal Play, and you actually went on to do a great TED Talk. And in this very successful TED Talk, you talk about how, as humans, we need physical activity. And you also said something that I thought was really quite amusing and surprising, and that was that you've worked with children from 4 to 94 years of age. And it's really about helping them learn how to fall in love with movement again, along the lines of what you've been saying. So talk to us about why that's so important, and then maybe give us a bit more information about your Primal Play method and how that can help us.
Yeah, so it's about embracing one's inner child. And so as a child, it's very easy to do so, right? We're encouraged to be children and to be childlike and to play. But as we get older, we're often discouraged from our playful state. We've got to get serious. We've got to conform. You've got to stay in your high chair. You've got to stop crawling on the ground. You've got to, sit at your desk or at school, playtime becomes, the moments you have during the day as a break at school. And then those breaks become less and less. So, playtime then becomes, you've got to do that additional studying. So there comes a point in time where we're play deprived, and we conform. And so the joy for movement is lost. And unless you're very sporty, you're gifted in terms of sport, and even then, even if you are, it becomes very much about training and about specializing, and it becomes less about the joy and more about the winning and making the team and being chosen and selected. So that passion can wane, especially if you're not really good at that particular sport, and so we've lost that joy for movement. And it's not just a joy for movement. I think many of us lose passion and a zest for life.
So I think that all exercise, all movement is good. It's good for our mental health. Quite often it means that you are doing it with other people, so it's got that community aspect. And I think it encourages women to get out of their minds and into their bodies. And I think sometimes when you have a diagnosis, perhaps you can almost become a little bit disenfranchised from the rest, from your body. And so I think, exercise really ticks so many boxes: relaxation, endorphins, getting outside. It doesn't matter what it is. I think if you really want to kind of hone in on it, though, that one form that can be particularly helpful is resistance training. So building up that muscle. This is obviously not going to be open to everybody at all stages of their journey, but when you can, if you can lift weights, I think that it can be incredibly helpful. We were talking about blood glucose monitors. Actually, the more muscle you have, the better you are. The more insulin sensitive you are, which is a good thing. So it's a really good way of managing your glucose, because basically your muscles act like a sponge and they kind of suck it up. Building that muscle is incredibly important. But so is yoga, so is Pilates, all those kind of more mindful activities, I think, can be really, really helpful.
And it can have a positive impact on our hormones as well. When it comes to breast cancer, it can help well, for women of all ages, but also in particular older women, it can help regulate our circulating hormones. And we know that particularly when we get older, but at all stages, hormones such as estrogen, even though we don't produce estrogen after the menopause, we can still produce it in some parts of our body, such as fat cells. And exercise can help regulate that and reduce those circulating hormones, which is important.
Well, and it can, help to regulate cortisol, which is the hormone. And actually, when your cortisol is high, your estrogen and your sex hormone production is low. So again, it's about managing stress and things like that. So yeah, there is always, nothing happens in isolation, right? So everything is kind of in your body. Think of hormones particularly as like this kind of symphony, and there's a real kind of interplay between them. So we are giving them the raw ingredients and hoping, that will help them to function to the best of their abilities. And this is something actually that I wanted to touch on previously. I think there is a lot, when we're talking about hormones, there's quite a lot of pseudoscience around things like balancing hormones. And like what I've just said is kind of, it almost sounds a little bit wishy-washy. You give it the raw ingredients and you kind of hope for the best. And really, that is essentially, unless you are adding in thyroxine because you've got, Hashimoto's, for example, or if you're adding in HRT because you're managing menopause symptoms, that is one specific way and a very dose-dependent way that you can manage hormones. But when it comes to food, essentially we're just trying to give our bodies the best ingredients that we can. But there is a sort of certain faction, I think, of social media that are talking about balancing hormones in terms of, seed cycling and things like that. So,
seed cycling?
Yeah,
Can
exactly.
you explain that?
Exactly.
What is
Your
that?
face says it all. So it's, people are saying that you need to eat seeds, certain types of seeds in a certain order throughout your menstrual cycle in order... it's just that level, that kind of detailed ability to manage hormones just doesn't exist through food, unfortunately. If it did, we'd all be doing it,
Yeah.
So I think it's very easy for women to get sucked into that and then spend a lot of headspace, working out sunflower seeds in my luteal phase. It's got to be pumpkin seeds, here. Really, we just want to be kind of
There's nothing particularly
de-stressing.
intuitive about living your life, kind of medicating yourself via the foods that you eat. And I suppose you might call that, there's this thing called meno-washing and menosphere, and women are very prone to getting caught up in it. And is this driven by a fear? What's it driven by?
Yeah, it's driven by women being very vulnerable at this time. And obviously people... companies are latching onto it and recognizing that women, if they're not getting the support that they need, perhaps from their GPs, because they're not trained as effectively, as they could be, then there's this kind of big disparity, this health gap. And so women are quite desperate, I see lots of women who are feeling really, really low because of their symptoms. And therefore, they will be trying these magnets in their pants or, exactly. And a lot of this stuff, it's using up headspace that could be, focused elsewhere, like moving your body, like eating generally pretty well. We don't have to kind of hyper fixate on the minutiae. What I'm trying to get women to do is to kind of pull the big levers, the things that we've already talked about, stress reduction, sleep, community, eating well. And actually, you don't need to be worrying about eating seeds in a certain order, or the fact that, dairy is quote unquote inflammatory, or that there are lectins in beans that are trying to kill you, or seed oils, that are inflammatory. All of this is just, it's taking up too much of women's valuable headspace.
So the more we know about exactly how chemicals change normal cells into cancerous ones, the better we can design efficient tests that predict whether chemicals are carcinogenic. And, that is going to be a lot more effective than trying to, test every chemical in an animal. Testing chemicals for their ability to cause cancer takes years and millions of dollars. So if we can develop more efficient tests that can can lead to better and more proactive regulations so that potential carcinogens can be phased out and replaced with safer alternatives. We can also develop those safer alternatives based on evidence that they don't activate pathways that cause cancer. Understanding how chemicals cause breast cancer also has implications for cancer treatment. So knowing the pathways to cancer can help to identify high-risk individuals who, are going to be particularly susceptible to cancer development. It can also help to design interventions that prevent or treat cancer, and it can help us understand how chemical exposures might be diminishing the effectiveness of cancer therapies.
And you've also created a database of mammary carcinogens. So it's like an all-encompassing list of chemicals, and all the chemicals that you've identified as having some link to breast cancer. Now, at Breast Cancer UK, we've come up with a list of A to Z of chemicals, probably not quite the same as yours, but nevertheless chemicals that we are concerned about because of their endocrine disrupting qualities. Now, I'm trying to understand how you came up with this list. How did you identify this very specific list of chemicals? And which chemicals in particular should we know about that are on that list?
Yeah, so our list includes chemicals that were able to induce mammary tumors in rodents because that suggests they could do the same in humans. And we also included chemicals that increase estrogen or progesterone signaling because those hormones are well established to increase breast cancer risk. So we looked for chemicals that cause cells to produce more estrogen or progesterone, and we also looked for chemicals that activate the estrogen receptor because those are both pathways that, can increase estrogen and progesterone signaling. Our database also includes a classification for whether those rodent carcinogens and endocrine disruptors are DNA damaging, because that's another important way that chemicals can cause many types of cancer. So this data had actually been generated for quite a few chemicals, although not as many as we would like, and we wanted to integrate it and present it in a way where scientists, policymakers, and consumer protection groups can identify the chemicals that are most likely to increase breast cancer risk and prioritize them for action.
And have you got any examples of how that list has been used?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one example is the Food Packaging Forum last year published a paper where they took our list of potential breast carcinogens and crossed it with their list of chemicals that have been detected in food contact materials. And they published on that, identifying the types of food contact materials that contain these potential breast carcinogens. We are also doing work at Silent Spring where we are, trying to partner with community groups to study their exposures to these chemicals. So, for example, we have a project going on where we are looking for these breast cancer relevant chemicals in products that are used by Black women to understand how they're being exposed, and we're partnering with community groups to communicate with that with those participants and with others to help them understand what chemicals they're being exposed to, and we're working with them to help them reduce their exposures. We have other community engaged studies going on with firefighters, nurses, immigrant workers. So we're really trying to translate this list to many different applications that can help, individuals act, but also trying to, share our information with policymakers so that they can prioritize chemicals for reduction at the policy level.